channel, Non-Dual Christian, which is an unusual name because people don't tend to think of Christianity as being non-dual. So if you're new here, I'm Jill, and my background is in Christian ministry, in teaching, and in theology and religious studies. For many years, learning, but also learning through my own experience of life and my own experience of faith, and coming to a point where going deeper is what enriches me. And I make these videos because I want to share what I'm learning. And it's taken me into a new place. And it's a place of more of a mystical awareness, direct knowing of Jesus from the heart. So if you're interested in finding out about Jesus as a guide, as a spiritual teacher and mentor, or if you're somebody that's also had experience of Christianity in your traditional upbringing, but you maybe are looking for something deeper, or maybe you are deconstructing and ready to reconstruct, then thank you for joining me. I'm so thrilled with some of the messages I'm getting from people as I've started to just be a little bit braver. And it is about being brave, because when I make these videos, I am putting myself out there. I am aware that there can be resistance and kickback from this. I've had it before, although amazingly, recently, the comments have just been so positive. So maybe there's a little shield of protection around that. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm being really clear about explaining what it is I'm about and what I'm not about. And the algorithm might be working with me, bringing people who are looking for that kind of content. And I just want to read a comment from somebody here. You will know who you are. I'm not going to mention your name, but you say, "Good morning. Just wanted to say, your videos have brought me into a new realm of life. Your last 3 have been so helpful and insightful. So much to learn." My dad is 93, and we spent yesterday talking about non-duality. Just wanted to share my deep appreciation. How lovely is that? And non-duality, it may be something that's new to you. What it really means is oneness. The deeper we go, the more we find oneness in the teaching, not only of all the great spiritual mystics of all time and all traditions, but in the teaching of Jesus too. And that doesn't always make its way into the teaching of Christianity, because non-dualism was new to me, and I had to kind of look outside of my home tradition, outside of the home camp, in order to be introduced to it, to even have heard of it as a term. So I'm interested in returning to the teachings of Jesus and finding that wisdom that is perennial, universal wisdom in his teachings too. And I'm going to be returning today to the I am sayings and looking at them in context. So the I am sayings. Before I do that, I just wanted to mention that Jesus is, before I read the text where we find these I am sayings, I just wanted us to think about Jesus as a rabbi and what that actually meant. So you'd have in the Jewish tradition children, very young children, learning the Torah. And the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. Have I got those in the right order? I'm not sure I have. But the point is, I've got a Bible here to show you just how much that is. But it's one of these Bibles that has these beautiful, really thin, crinkly pages. So you don't get necessarily the volume of how, just what a kind of body of text that is. But it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot to learn off by heart, and that's what they would need to do if they were going to graduate. So at the age of 10, by the age of 10, they'd be expected to know the Torah, or the way, as it was sometimes called, the way. And of course we know followers of Jesus, the early followers of Jesus were referred to as followers of the way. Before it was known as Christianity, it was the way. So it reminds me a little bit of in London, the black cab drivers have to learn the knowledge, and the knowledge is all the streets of London, all the landmarks and everything, and they have to have a test. And the test would be something they weren't expecting, like, just take me from Paddington Station to Tate Gallery or somewhere and tell me all the landmarks on the way. And they'd have to say, well, turn left up on Crompton Street or whatever it is. I'm just making this up. I have no idea. Then they'd have to say second right, past the, whatever it is. And they have to have this knowledge that really is very difficult to learn. You think there's such a skill to have that knowledge. And in a similar way, children would be required to learn the Torah. And when they were, I think it was it about age 12? I'm not sure. They would have to have a test. And if they passed the test, then they could continue to be a rabbi, trained to be a rabbi. And if they didn't, then they would find another trade. And we know about Jesus, if you remember from the New Testament, that there is mention of him when he was 12. He was in Jerusalem. It was when they travelled to Jerusalem for the census or something. And Mary and Joseph lost him, and they eventually found him in the temple. He said, well, didn't you know I'd be in the house of my father's house? And he was actually talking to the scribes, these elders, deep in conversation with them about religious matters. And they marvelled at his knowledge, even at that really young age. So clearly he showed real promise and gifting in his ability to be a spiritual teacher. And that's what he was. So we know that he went calling, and it was quite common for rabbis then would collect disciples, and their disciples would follow them, travel with them, and learn from them. And each rabbi had his own yoke. They'd call it a yoke, which is just like a way of leading people. So they had their own style and their own emphasis and so on. And they were qualified to be able to interpret and teach in their own way. So that was what Jesus was. It's not therefore surprising that in context of anything that Jesus said, they would be asking him questions, especially when he's just having a sort of, a small group chat with his closest disciples. It's not like the Sermon on the Mount to everyone. There were different levels of teaching depending on, whether you were one of his initiates. And this passage that we might be familiar with, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, is from John 14, verse 6. And if we look back to the verse before, it's Thomas that's asking him, how can we know the way? And in context, Jesus is saying, he's explaining to them that I'm going to be leaving you, I'm going to be going. And they're asking, well, where are you going? How can we know the way to you? So this is a mystical question. What does he mean he's leaving them? Well, maybe he did know and have a sense that his earthly life was soon coming to an end. He knew that, trouble was closing in and that he wouldn't be around much longer in the flesh. So his understanding, he was having to convey to them. What does he mean by the Father? I am going back to the Father. Well, Jesus spoke Aramaic, and one thing we do know, if we look at his teaching of the Lord's Prayer, that when he says our Father as it's translated and as we know it, in the Aramaic, that phrase would have been Abun Debashmaya. Abun. And Abun is a word that really has more of a meaning of like the womb, the birthing principle. If anything, it's more of a feminine, but it could be a feminine or a masculine. It's just this like the origin, but from where everything is birthed. So Abun is the birthing principle of the cosmos, of all that is. So Jesus is returning to the Abun, the all that is, or the Abba, as he says on the cross. He says Abba Father, doesn't he? So what does he mean by that? We think of it as just going to God in heaven, God the Father in heaven, off planet. Is that Jesus' understanding? If it's the birthing principle, maybe then it's the ground of all being, the sustaining ground, the origin. And he's saying that's where he's going. He's returning to where he began. And they're saying, how do we get there? What is the way to get there? And in that context, he's answering, I am. It's the I am. You can almost imagine him saying, I am is the way. I am is the truth. I am is the life. It's just started raining really heavy and it's quite dramatic, a bit apocalyptic actually outside the window. I don't know if it's picking up the sound of the rain. It's lovely, really refreshing. But this notion of I am as the ground of all being is something that we're not really taught in Western traditions. But if you listen to non-dualist teachers speaking about it, I'm thinking of Rupert Spira, who is probably one of my favourite teachers. He often says, if you go back to, if you close your eyes and just, what can you tell me about I am? What can you tell me about it? We often say, I am Jill. We might give it a name. So we've qualified it in some way by the conditioning that we have. Or we might say, I am cold or I am warm. So we're qualifying I am experience by a sensation of the skin, I am warm and cold. Perceptions and sensations and thoughts and feelings are ways in which we qualify the I am experience. But if we take all of those things away and just strip it right back to the I am, what is that? It's just essential awareness of being. If we were to think about another living being, something like a tree, I'm just looking at a tree outside my window, and if that tree could speak, what would it say? It would say, I am. If we were to do that for an inanimate object, like a rock, a stone, what would it say if it could say something about itself? It would say, I am. So I am just takes us back to beingness, just back to our true nature, our essential stripped back nature. So when they're saying, what is the way? Where will we find you? He's saying, I am is the way. Go back to that origin of all of it. Find the origin inside you. The origin in the Aramaic, in the Abrahamic religions, is the image of God, or images of the divine. So you find that ground of being within. And certainly Jesus always taught the kingdom is within. And when we think of returning to the kingdom, and we tend to push it always back to after death, after physical death, we think of it as heaven, and heaven as a place, a destination. It's usually far away. And yet Jesus didn't teach that. He said it's within, but he also said it's among you. So the kingdom is within and among you, meaning it can't be divided between what seems to us as separate people. It's a communal thing, because actually there is only oneness. And we all exist within this field of oneness that Jesus gave the name kingdom to. Why is it kingdom? Because our essence, our sovereign essence, is Christ consciousness. And Christ is King. And it's through Christ that we overcome all the powers of darkness, all the powers of evil in this dark age, which are all to do with the illusion of duality and separateness. Now, I'm going off onto a different subject, and we can keep that subject for another time, the idea of Christ and what Christ means. What I love about this is it just keeps on unfolding all the time. Once you have this new awareness, then the familiar passages and concepts just take on new meaning. There's something I've started doing on my website, and it's a one-to-one for faith shift, if you just want to have a chat. And I had a session last week with somebody, and they were just working a lot of things through, and it was through discussion with other friends who were Christians, who were challenging them, and they were getting a bit of pushback on certain things. And so I think he saw my videos and just wanted to have a chat. I really like to talk to somebody who's just open-minded and who I can say this to freely without any sort of judgment, because sometimes you may have experience of finding that sometimes you have to be careful what you say to who among your churchy Christian friends. I find this, I'm navigating this all the time. And there's always common ground, because the common ground is Jesus. I love Jesus. I follow Jesus. He's my saviour. He's my friend. He's my guide. He's in my heart. I love him. We have that in common. And I can sit down with any Christian who really knows that experience, and I'm immediately among kindred spirit. I know that. I also know that if I start talking about non-duality and oneness, and that it may just make people a bit uneasy, and I have to just gauge that, and then I'm sensitive to it, and I'll know that I don't continue that if I'm not getting any sort of positive feedback on it. And you may be in that place. What may happen in that situation is that you start to doubt yourself, because they may seem to be disapproving and think that you might be going astray, might be saying things that are a bit new age, may feel that they have to correct you. They may even try to remind you of scripture, say it's this, that, the other. And that can then leave you feeling a bit isolated. It doesn't mean that you're convinced. You probably just sort of nod and smile. It's an easy life. That's probably the best thing to do, rather than to get into an argument, then play the apologetics game. Ping pong, Bible ping pong. It never ends well, and it can go on for a very long time. I've learned, I know from experience, but. The point is, this is what the one-to-one faith shift sessions are about, just being able to talk about it. And on this particular session, this person brought up, they came and said I've got some Bible passages I want to talk about. I thought, great, love it. Because I had no idea. And of course, I come to these sessions in the same way that I do when I do Reconnective Healing. I just turn up. At first, I used to get really anxious. I would be anxious about that. I might think, well, I don't know that I can help. It's really sunny now. It's funny how that weather has changed. The sun is now streaming through the window. And I could have this sense of imposter syndrome. But what I have learned is that when I just step out of the way, get ego out of the way, it's not about me. It's about this. It's about turning up, being authentic, and knowing that in the being here, that field of being that we both share, and myself, the person that I'm having a session with, is also shared by the Master, by Jesus. It's a field of oneness. It's shared by all. So when we are gathered, Jesus is here, and it's a case of sitting at the feet of the Master together. And so I might start I may respond by something that comes to mind, but there are sometimes occasions where I'll say, I don't really know. And in the session itself, I will just listen and wait, and a thought will come. And I'm learning, I'm kind of like, wow, that's amazing. And the wisdom and the teaching is happening for both of us. So they truly are, enriching. And this was one of the texts that this person brought. And I did think it was something that would be good to share more widely with you too. So that's something that may interest you. Do look at my website, jillbrennan.co.uk, if that's something you might want to do. And I will always share, although I respect people's privacy, obviously, I would never share videos. We do them by FaceTime. I do healings usually just by audio, and then ring the person back at the end of the session so that they can relax, and then we speak at the end. But with the one-to-one discussions, it's nice to see a person's face. It's nice to feel that you're actually having a coffee with them and a chat. So they're by video call, but I would never share any videos. I know that some people do share discussions, and they're fascinating, but I think that you're taking yourself to a vulnerable space, especially in this context where it may you may be part of a faith community, and you're just needing permission to think outside the box a little bit. But some of the teaching that comes through, certainly I will be sharing on my channel, because that's teaching for all. It's generic. And sometimes the themes that people might bring up, issues that they have or that they have questions about, I think, well, they won't be alone in that. There'll be other people too that think, well, I was thinking the same thing. That resonates with me. So I hope that has been helpful for you. Just listening to see if there's something else that needed to come in relation to this. I don't think so. Really just about the incarnation. Maybe that's where we go next time, that incarnation is the human and the divine. And Jesus as totally human, totally divine, is something that's really difficult to grasp. And if we grasp it completely, then that would be the way into understanding the I am sayings in relation to every one of us. So lots more themes. Let me know in the comments which you'd like me to cover next. We can look at incarnation. We can look at what it means to be in Christ. We can look at the concept of kingdom and just see what mystical teaching, what non-dual teaching comes through to enrich us in those areas. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye for now. All my love. God bless.